And here it is. Okay. Excuse me. As I mentioned before, this is the hopefully very timely How to Write Your Best College Essay webinar. Here are all of our social media links. If you want to follow us on social media, you can scan that QR code to sign up for MEFA emails. We'll send you, one or two a week, probably one a week, based on the age of your child. It's going to be full of information that will be relevant to you. So if you want, just take a minute and scan that, or just visit MEFA.org. Just a few things before we get started and before I introduce really the guest or the host really of this webinar. I want to tell you about MEFA. MEFA is the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. We were created by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts back in 1982 with a public service mission to help families to plan, save, and pay for college and career readiness. We do that in a variety of ways. Our topic is pretty narrow tonight. This is how to write your best college essay. But if you have any questions regarding saving for college, college admissions, paying for college, financial aid, you can please feel free to take advantage of our free guidance at collegeplanning@mefa.org or calling us up at 800-449-MEFA. Tonight, we have disabled the chat. You can ask for a live transcript to be produced while we're going on. And if you have any questions, I have my colleague here with me, as well as myself. My colleague Jennifer Bento-Pinion and I will be reading the questions as Drew is doing the presentation. So feel free to ask. And our guest tonight, speaking very knowledgeably and intelligently on the subject, is Drew Carter, who is the Deputy Director of Admissions at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester. And we work a lot with Drew. He's done a lot of presentations for us. He's been on the MEFA podcast a few times. Always a treat to have him on and to get to hear what he has to say. So I think you're really going to enjoy hearing him speak on this topic. So remember, once more, if you have any questions, submit them through the Q&A. And now I will turn things over to Drew.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm really excited to be here tonight and be here with all of our attendees and all of our MEFA staff, including Jonathan and Jennifer. I want to reiterate Jonathan's plug for all the great services that MEFA provides, including the MEFA podcast. I've listened to many of those I've hit the subscribe button. Maybe that seems self-centered because I've been on the podcast, but I assure you, I cannot listen to the sound of my voice. So I've never actually listened to my own appearances on the podcast. I think my kids have, but definitely I haven't. It came on once in the car and I wanted to throw my phone out the window immediately. I didn't, but I wanted to. Anyway, just to set the scene a little bit, we're going to talk about, I forget the name of how you named this, Jonathan, how to write your best college essay. Is that what it was?
That's right. Yep.
I want to give you a brief roadmap before we start going through the topics that are up here. Number one, I want to give you a little. Here are my goals for tonight. Number one, I want to give all of our attendees a little bit more insight into who their audience is for this college essay. The second is I want to provide enough background information so that students and their family and supporters feel like they have a better sense of direction when they're working on the essay. The third thing, with enough of this background information, I think I want students to feel like the time they spend working on the essay is more efficient. Sometimes I think kids spend too much time on the essay, and it's mostly because they haven't gone to a webinar like this and gotten real good information. And then finally, and it's my number one goal, and I'm saying it last, but it is definitely my number one goal, is I want students to feel less stress about writing their college essay. I would sacrifice the other three goals if I could accomplish that one. It's my goal almost all of the time when I'm talking about applying to college. And hopefully just with a little bit of information, we can accomplish that goal. So let's start with the first question, and that's right over here over my shoulder in green. Why an essay? I get so many questions from kids about the essay over the course of, from kind of April of their junior year to November or December of their senior year. And so often, if not almost always, students have never just stopped and really asked themselves, why is why is there an essay? Why am I writing an essay to apply to college? More importantly, why do colleges want me to write an essay in my college application? And the reason it's important to think about that and to examine the reasons is that it does help set the framework about what students are trying to accomplish. Okay. And the truth is, and this always surprises students when I say this, that colleges are require an essay really for two reasons. That's it. When admissions offices are reading essays, they're really only thinking about two things. And they have two questions to be answered. Number one, can this student write? Number two, can the student write about themselves? That's it. It's actually that the college essay is so much simpler, I think, than most students make it out to be in their mind when they don't really stop to start at square one and think about why they're writing an essay. So let's think about those two questions really quickly. Um, can the student write? Well, that's a fair, that's a fair question for colleges to have. Can the student write at a certain level where they can be successful writing in their college classroom over the course of 4 years? So at its most basic, it's just a writing sample where colleges can measure writing ability. That's the sort of like the baseline. Uh, the good news is that there's enough tools out there to help students craft an essay that should be, at the very least, grammatically correct and organized in a certain way. And we'll get to that in a couple of minutes. But it is a sort of a baseline measurement of what the student's writing ability is. Now, the second question, can the student write about themselves? That's an important one because if that didn't exist, if we just said, can the student write? Well, then I think every student would just hand in their term paper from US history in junior year and say, well, see, I can write. And we would read a whole lot of essays about, I don't know, Henry Ford or, I don't know, Teddy Roosevelt or the Battle of Bull Run. Or I don't know. We'd read a lot of historical essays that were recycled from a class during their junior year. We make the topic be about the student for a few reasons. Number one, we want it to be original writing. We want it to be a piece of writing composed for the college essay. And students don't do a lot of, personal original writing in school. And so there's a pretty good chance it's going to be original. The second reason is it's an opportunity, perhaps, for colleges to learn a little bit more information about the student, a little bit more background information, a little more context, and hopefully a little bit more clarity on who that student might be over the course of 4 years. So let's go back to the original question. Why an essay? It's so colleges can figure out if you can write and if you can write about yourself. That's really it. And to the first question, can you write? I think there's enough tools. The second question is, can you write about yourself? That creates a lot of anxiety in students because it comes to the question of like, well, what should I say about myself? How am I supposed to talk about myself? And what voice should I adopt? And we'll get to some of this stuff on other topics. I don't want to minimize the second question. Can you write about yourself and saying it's so easy? It's not. It is the source of so much stress and anxiety for students. But let's move on to our next topic. I just want to be sure that we've identified clearly on like there's an essay for those two reasons: to measure if the students can write and to measure if students can write about themselves. That's really the reasons why there's an essay when students apply to college. Okay,
Drew, oh, excuse me. I wonder if
sure.
I told you before I came in that I had one topic that I definitely wanted to talk about. Do you think now is a good time to talk about that, or
Sure,
because it
totally
does
fine.
seem to go to the topic or the heart of the topic of to what you just said, which is the rise of ChatGPT and large language models, AI. Um, how are admissions offices or responding to this?
Um, you know, in a lot of ways, I think people are surprised at um, how little we're responding to this.
Hmm.
The truth is, outside influence in a student's college essay is not new. We have dealt for this for decades. When I first started in admissions, it was uh, older cousins, older siblings, and perhaps even parents and guardians helping a student too much in their essay. And that's what we were worried about. We spoke out a lot about that. We're really that seemed like that was just going to bring the college essay to its knees because this outside influence was never going to be authentic writing from a student. And then kind of like in my early years in the profession, the internet started to come up and it was like, whoa, wait a minute. Now students can find other students' essays on the internet and they can find other writings on the internet. They can source material from the internet, topics, and people can search what's a good topic. And, gosh, we've dealt with that. We talked about, really like students, using the internet for for brainstorming and to think and to connect with other people, but really trying to find their unique voice. And then now that we get this third wave of sort of outside influence, and that's really AI. So I say that because outside influence is not new to us. The thing that's worth understanding is number one, we have lots of other corresponding pieces of information. If we were reading essays in a vacuum, gosh, maybe it would be tough to know what's authentic to the student's voice and what's not. But the truth is, we have the student's academic record from high school. We have their grades in English over the course of 4 years and their grades in all their humanities courses. We have teacher recommendations where the student's writing ability is often referred to by the teacher. Or the school counselor recommendation, who's going to put the academic work in context. We also have, maybe other smaller pieces of writing, whether it's on the extracurricular page or at a lot of colleges, who might have supplemental essays. So there's all this other corresponding pieces where you do get a lot better at getting a sense of what that student's writing ability is going to be like. So students don't believe me when I say, yeah, we can kind of tell when you've had outside influences in your essay, whether it's a sibling or a parent or friend or internet or AI. They don't believe me, but I say, like, if you did what we do, which is read applications 8 to 12 hours a day, 4 to 5 to 6 months in a row, 5 to 6 days a week, you get really good at that skill. And there's a lot of great uses for AI. I actually sat in on 2 webinars today about AI in my job, but I haven't yet heard it say it can write in a unique personal voice for a teenager and reveal specific things. I think there is an appropriate place for technology and outside influences in brainstorming and in spell checking. Gosh, that was a big to do when that first came out as well.
Hmm.
So I think there's an appropriate role. It's just not in writing the essay. It was probably in other stages. And I will say, I was at an event recently, and a student asked me about this, and I misunderstood the question. I thought the student, who was a high school junior, was asking me about AI in reading students' essays. And I
Uh,
gave this answer, and he sort of said, "Oh, I think he misunderstood the question," and sort of rephrased it. And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I kind of gave a version of the answer that I just gave to you. And then the student and I looked at each other, and we sort of chuckled a little bit. And I said, "I won't use AI to read your essay if you don't use AI to write your essay. Can we make that deal together?" Because the look on his face when he saw that, like, oh, like colleges, teachers, professors, like AI can be used in reading and evaluating, which is certainly not what a student wants. And
right.
I said to him, well, we certainly don't want AI writing that essay. So I think we can have a little tacit consent here where we all sort of agree um, to use our own eyes, to use our own brains, and to try to communicate and connect in that way, and to use technology as a tool um, to help along the process.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about how important the essay is, and I hope anyone who's hearing me tonight will perhaps remember these words come September, October of the student's senior year. And if they can't remember, maybe just watch the recording of this and remind. the essay gets so blown out of proportion in the minds of high school seniors. It is a great cause of stress for so many reasons, but almost most importantly is it takes on this outsized importance in their mind because they think it's going to make or break their admissions chances when they apply to college. The truth is that is incredibly, incredibly unlikely to actually ever happen. The world is filled with urban legends that begin with, oh, did you hear about so and so who got into Harvard just because of their essay? And the opposite is true as well. Well, did you hear about so and so who didn't get into blank college just because of their essay? I can assure you, those are all urban legends. None of them are true. Nobody gets in or doesn't get in because of their essay. I've done this job for over 2 decades. I remember so many essays. I remember conversations about essays in admissions committees. I don't really remember essays making and breaking admissions chances. The truth is, 99.99% of the time, or perhaps even 100% of the time, it fits. The essay fits as a piece of the puzzle, as a piece of the equation that results in a decision on a student's application. It's part of how we learn about the student and we learn about their writing ability, but it is almost never really going to make or break a student's chances. It's just one small piece of an overall equation. It's worthy of the student's focus. It's worthy of like true intent, but it is not worthy of stress and anxiety based on feelings of how big a role it plays. I think so much of that stress becomes because it's completely within the control of the student. It's the one thing on the student's plate, at the end of the summer or early in the senior year that they have complete control over when it comes to the application. But the truth is, it's just another piece of the puzzle, and it's not worthy of blowing out of proportion. It's not more important than the student's academic record. It's not more important than so many other pieces. It's important, but it is not near the top of the list of important documents within the student's application. This, flies in the face, I think, of what a lot of people think. But the truth is, the academic profile is generally always the most important um, piece in the puzzle when making a decision on a student's application. And the essay, frankly, is just it's in the frosting. It's in the frosting of the cake. It's just one other piece of the puzzle, but not an important piece. So when it's senior fall and students are stressed about the essay because they think they have to nail it or they're not going to get in anywhere, please remind them it's not that important. It's an important piece, but it is not the most important part of the student's application. Okay, let's move on to the question of topics, because that's really sort of appropriate for where we're at in the timeline right now. Junior spring over the summer is really the time when students are thinking about what should they write their essay about. And students and their supporters and family members spend a lot of time. Let me rephrase that. Students and their supporters and family members waste a lot of time thinking about what they think we in the admissions world want to write their essay about. Because you're logged into tonight's webinar, I will answer that question for you and save you that time. No one cares. No one in the admissions world cares one bit what you write your essay about. The topic you choose for your essay is meaningless. We read great essays every year on stupid, silly topics. And we read horrible essays every year on what the guidebooks say is a great essay. We read great essays every year about grandmas, and we read terrible essays every year about grandmas, right? It's not grandma's fault. It never has been. There is no connection between the topic of your essay and the quality of your essay. I'm going to say that one again because it's probably the most important thing I say tonight. There is no connection between the topic of your essay and the quality of your essay. There is, however, a connection between how you feel about the topic of your essay and the quality of your essay. That's the connection. You are going to write the best essay on the topic that you want to write about. Okay. And I assure you that we are going to get out of that essay exactly what you experienced when writing that essay. And the truth is, I think a lot of students are bored writing their essay. If you're bored writing it, we will be bored reading it. Okay? But if you choose a topic that you want to write about, you just might find something when writing it. You might find meaning. Okay, that's setting the bar a little high. You just might find mojo. You might find a little fun or a little bit of humility or a little bit of embarrassment or whatever. Whatever you find writing it, we will find reading it. Jonathan, I don't know if I've ever told you this story before, um, but I had an example. I was visiting high schools in the fall, um, and I was talking to students who are interested in applying to Holy Cross, and we actually talked about essays. And I had finished my little talk and I was leaving the school, and a girl grabbed me by the door as I was leaving the school. I don't know if I told you the story before, but as I was leaving, I turned around and she's like, "Oh, Mr. Carter, I was just in your session. Um, can I ask you about my essay? I didn't want to ask in front of everybody else." I was like, "Sure, I got a few minutes." And like all the kids are changing classes and it's chaos in her school. And she said, "Well, I have two different essays on two totally different hot topics, and they're both rough drafts. I'm just not sure which one I should go forward with." I said, "God, I love that approach. Well, why don't you tell me about both of them, and I'll tell you what I think." And she said, "Okay, but I don't know. The first one, it's so silly." She says, "Well, here's the thing. I have two older sisters, and they both worked as waitresses at this one restaurant in town when I was growing up. And I just thought that was like the coolest summer job you could ever have. So this summer, I got a job at that restaurant, but the owners wouldn't let me serve customers because I didn't have any experience. So I had to do the worst jobs. I had to sweep the floors. I had to take out the trash. I had to answer the phone. I had to clean the bathrooms. Can you imagine? But then the last night of my summer job, the owners finally let me serve customers. They felt kind of badly for me. And, I kind of stuck with the job the whole summer. And I was having the best time. The other servers were being so supportive and they kind of taught me what to do. And I was having so much fun. The customers were so nice until I spilled an entire tray of drinks all over a family. And then she went on to say, "Well, my second essay is about this like community service thing I did." I'll ask you, Jonathan, which of those essays do you want to read?
The first one, for sure.
I'll ask you, Jonathan, which of those essays are you sure her parents told her she has to send to college?
The second one.
I hope everyone attending this webinar will remember this example, because everyone is likely every student applying to college is likely to have a crossroads moment like that, where they're bouncing back and forth between two topics, one of which is something they think they kind of want to write about, and the other is something they think they're kind of supposed to write about. And I'll tell you what I told the girl in the hallway of her school. I said, both sound like great topics for an essay, but hearing you talk about the first one suggests you found something when writing it. Um, I don't know, maybe it was just humility, maybe it was embarrassment, maybe it was fun, maybe it was a lesson about hard work, and maybe it was something, but that's probably what we would find when reading it. And hearing you talk about the second one suggests you're just kind of going through the motions. And I said, rest assured, we'll learn about that community service project on your resume and probably in your school counselor's recommendation. So there's other opportunities. I would love to finish this story by saying, and when I read her application, I saw that she wrote the first essay ad. I don't know that I ever read her application. I can't tell you which essay she wrote, but I can tell you I understand that conflict of like doing what you think you're supposed to do, but know that everyone in this webinar knows that we all wanted to read the first essay, and the admissions world does too, not because of the topic, but because of how she talked about it and what was clear that she found something when writing it. So I hope everyone will.
Now, I wonder if I could ask you a couple of follow-ups here, because I know I've
Sure.
spoken to you before on this topic, and I think it is such a good point. Um, Number one, about the audience for an essay, right? And
Yeah.
what the student has experience with. And I think you paint a good picture when you talk about why the essay is your favorite part, right? Of
Yeah.
the application. Yeah. And the
And as I
difficulty
said
they have.
before, it's not the most important part of the application. That's the academic profile, but it's the admissions world favorite part. And this is a good visual, right? Because you're sort of looking at me out of my computer screen, and this is kind of what we look like when we're reading applications. We're sort of typing away and clicking with the mouse, and a lot of tabbing and a lot of like this. And it kind of, students will recognize the posture because it kind of looks like you're doing math homework, right? But then we get to the student's essay. And that's at that moment, we get to kind of minimize a few things and sit back in our chair, and our posture changes because for about 3 minutes there, when reading the student's essay, we get to just read and relax. And the essay is, it's the ice cream at the end of the math homework. It's what we text each other about in the admissions world. It's kind of how we remember students when we meet them after the application process. Again, it's not the most important part, but it is definitely our favorite part. And I think students get really worried about who their audience is. Students have spent their whole high school career writing for a very well-known audience. They write for their English teacher and their history teacher. And all of a sudden now, when you apply to college and there's all this stress about that, they write for an anonymous audience. And they sort of picture us in the worst possible way as this sort of curmudgeonly English professor with a red marker looking for the misplaced comma. Truth is, that's not who we are. We're someone involved in a repetitive process of reading applications, but who always looks forward to the essay, not with insanely high expectations, but just with the expectation of a couple minutes of a reprieve of the drudgery of reading applications, to relax and enjoy hearing a student's voice, hearing them kind of jump off the page to us.
I want to ask one more question about topics before we
Sure.
go, and that is that is the Common App essay prompts.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of students think that these are their choices,
Yeah.
and I don't know what you have to say. I mean, I know what you would have to say about it, but being an admissions officer, reading an essay, first of all, do you know ahead of time, are you aware of, okay, we're going to see this many essays about this question on the Common App and that question? And do you know when that's coming in? Yes, this person is acting off this prompt. And does that mean anything to you or not?
This is gonna it's gonna sound like I'm putting you on, but I don't even know what the prompts are. I like legitimately do not know what the essay prompts are. I never have in my entire career. I would venture to say most admissions professionals do not know what the essay prompts
Oh,
are.
is that right?
It's not something we think about. It's not something we look at. It's not something we look at when reading the essay.
Mhm.
We just read the essay. um, I would, I would, I always encourage students to think of the prompts as um, a useful tool if you're having trouble coming up with a topic. I would say don't even look at the prompts, ignore the prompts unless you're really struggling with it coming up with a topic. And if so, then refer to the prompts because they might help, that there are questions and they might help spark a thought in your mind about an appropriate topic to write about. Otherwise, it's a free topic of choice, right? What you want, and only lean on those prompts if you really feel like you're struggling and you want sort of a jump start to a thought process that takes you down a line. But I don't know anyone in admissions who cares about the prompts.
Good to know.
Okay, let's move on to editing. Um, Sometimes I think technology can certainly help here, right? Spell check, um, get you some ways. AI can, I think, help. I hope you use it to like clean up grammar. Grammarly, I think, is very popular these days. But don't use it to elevate your voice or to change your writing style. Um, we see that when it happens and it doesn't improve the essay, it just makes it kind of weird. Um, you also want to have somebody trusted look at the essay for you. Um, I kind of think English teachers and school counselors are the best people to approach to read your essay. They know you, they know your academic background, and they have a distance from you that your parents do not, that your best friend does not. Um, those people who are very, very, very close to you, best friends, family members, they they want you to sing your song. They think this is like your, gosh, it's your Nessun Dorma moment for those opera fans in the room. It's your moment to like sing your like famous aria. No, it's just a moment to prove you can write and you can write about yourself. And often, I think the advice that um, family members and really close friends will give you after proofreading your essay is to say, well, you need to brag about yourself more. That's not true. So that's why I think English teachers and school counselors, because they'll look for writing and writing style, and they'll give you some good feedback based on that, based on the assignment, not based on their sort of personal relationship with you. I think you need to share it with somebody else because spell check doesn't pick up everything, right? I do a workshop with a slide, and we show examples of of pieces of writing from essays where um, nothing was grammatically incorrect, but it was clearly wrong, and sort of hilariously wrong, um, because spell check doesn't pick up everything. So you need another set of human eyes to look at that essay for you to make sure that you're saying what you think you're saying and you're capturing your thoughts in that unique way. The last thing I'll say, and this is like a tiny little thing about editing, is paragraph breaks. Um, if you're going to write your essay, in a word processor in Google Docs or in Microsoft Word or something like that, when you paste it into the Common App website, you want to make sure that that all of your paragraph breaks and all of your formatting carried over with it. The most common mistake we see is it's been copy and pasted over, and all of the paragraph breaks have been eliminated, and the student submits the essay, and so it comes out as this like giant hamburger of words. Now it still has periods and spaces after periods, still have sentences, but it's all one big paragraph. That doesn't change how we think about your writing. It just makes it kind of hard to read. And you don't want your essay to be hard to read. So make sure that when you paste it in the Common App, that your paragraph breaks have carried over with you. And if you're curious if you have enough paragraph breaks in your essay, add one or two more. Make it easy on the eyes of your reader. Think about your essay, approaching your essay with the tapas approach, right? Small bites. Doesn't mean you change your essay, just means a few more paragraph breaks will make your essay a little bit easier on the eyes of the admissions reader. Remember, that person who's been reading off a screen of students' essays for 8 to 10 hours a day, 5 to 6 days a week, 3 to 4 to 5 months in a row. But I think for the good news is I think the kind of the cleanliness of the writing in the Common App essay has really improved over the years. I think a lot of the tools that students have on hand has been a big help. And then I think students are picking the right people to approach as proofreaders as well.
Let me ask you one thing, because I will tell a story now from my experience of is talking with a student. I was talking with her. It must have been October, and we were at an event, and we were talking about where she was going to be applying to college and how she was applying. I said, "Are you applying early anywhere? Early action, early decision?" And she said, "No, I was thinking about it, but I really needed more time to work on my essay, to edit my essay." And I said, "Okay." I said, "How long have you been editing your essay?" And she said, "4 months." So,
I
in
mean,
the,
that
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
as you said, it's a perfect segue to the kind of the last
Yes, yeah.
child you
Well,
do.
what she said was that I said, "Well, I think that's a little too long to be editing your essay." And she said, "Well, I kept showing it to different people. So I was showing it to my parents, and they would say, make it more like this. And then I would show my guidance counselor and say, make it more like this." And she was trying to accommodate everybody's
Yeah,
wishes.
that's an excellent point, Jonathan. And I think it's when my friends who have kids applying to college ask me this question, I say, show it to the English teacher, show it to the school counselor, end of list. Those are the only people, I call them proofreaders with perspective. Everyone's a proofreader, right? Your friends, your neighbors, your family, those are all proofreaders. College applicants don't need proofreaders. They need proofreaders with perspective. English teachers and guidance counselors are really the only proofreaders with perspective. I'm going to add something here. I'm going to go off script a little bit. There's a lot of people who want to offer you their services to help edit, refine, and even write your essay for a fee. These people exist on the internet and they exist in real life, and I just don't think it's necessary. I think the student's voice is valued in the admissions process. I think English teachers and school counselors are appropriate and probably the best editors, especially when you approach that English teacher or school counselor with a very specific question. I'll give you an example, Jonathan. I and I do this. I give this advice to students a lot. I say like, don't just bring your essay to your English teacher and I know it's not really in your hand anymore. It's digital, but the visual works better. But like, don't just approach their desk and throw it on their desk and say, "What do you think?" Um, Come with a question. Um, make it make them an engaged reader by asking them one question. It could be, "Here's my essay, Mr. Hughes. Um, I tried to grab my reader's attention at the beginning, but I'm not really sure it worked. Can you give this a read through and let me know if it did?" I like that approach because A, you've got them really thinking about something you're trying to accomplish in your essay. And then B, they're going to give you specific feedback on that and probably even see a suggestion if it didn't work. It also could be, here's my essay. I'm a little worried that there's not enough about me in this essay and there's too much about my summer camp. Can you take a quick read through here and let me know what you think? Again, you're going to get them thinking about an important question and you're going to get really good feedback. So English teachers and school counselors, ask them nicely, ask them in a timely way, and then give them one thing to think about. You're going to get great feedback.
That's a great point. I wonder if you could tell me what a timely way is. I mean, we're looking at this now. We're in May. I imagine when I'm thinking about the people in attendance here that they are juniors. And our guidance is that you should be, or a good time to start the essay is over the summer. Is that right?
I think it's a great time to, at the very least, be thinking about the essay. And um, I think for some students, what takes so long is identifying a topic
Hmm.
and being sort of present and aware that you're thinking about topics and thinking about topics that you might be interested in writing about. I have a friend who years ago was a school counselor, and he referred to the first draft of the student's Common App essay. He called that the ticket. And he said,
Hmm.
you cannot come to school senior year without a ticket. And his point was sometimes, and it's probably more common than uncommon, students just got to get that first draft out of the way.
Hmm.
Sometimes you got to just write a bad first draft so you can write a better second draft and an even better third draft. So um, I think the summer is a great time to be thinking about topics, identifying possible topics, and then hopefully writing a ticket, right? Writing that first draft. Understanding that that's probably not going to be the essay you send to college.
Hmm.
Maybe it will be that topic, maybe it won't, but you're never going to kind of know. You can't write a final draft until you write a first draft. So, and when I say about approaching your teacher or your school counselor for feedback in a timely way, what I mean by that is not on November 14th, because November 15th is a very popular deadline for college applications. So if you come to them on the 14th and say, can you look at my essay? I need to submit it tonight. You're not going to get a patient reader. You're not going to get a patient proofreader with perspective. So if you're approaching them, I hope you're giving them at a minimum a couple of days to find time to read that essay.
Thank you.
Okay. How about the last topic here, which is just letting go? I love the idea of a college essay. Um, let me rephrase that. I love the idea of a 650 word essay. I love it. 650 words is not a lot of words. That's what the word limit on the common application is. Um, it's really hard to write a good personal essay that is also short. it's a challenge. Um, I think it's a such a fun opportunity for anyone. Forget high school seniors. I think Jonathan and I could write a 650 word essay and we'd be challenged by it and we'd be frustrated by it and we'd be um, inspired by it. We'd be all of those things. I think it's such a great idea. And I know that that's not how high school students approach the college essay, with hopes for inspiration and fun. Um, but the truth is, it's just a moment in time. It's a glimpse. I can think back to some of my essays that I wrote when I applied to college and be unbelievably embarrassed by some of the things I know I wrote. Um, I, I applied before the Common App, um, and I don't remember all of the essays I wrote. I do remember that in one of my essays, I tried to make a comparison between Bill Cosby, Garfield, and Mikhail Gorbachev. Okay. If you see me getting red, it's because I'm embarrassed. I'm like so embarrassed by that idea. Um, it's a snapshot. That's what the essay is. It's a snapshot in time, that students will look back on, and have feelings about, but it's not bigger than it really is. It's 650 words. It's an opportunity for students to find their voice, and exercise their voice and to bring color and dimension to their application, but it's not going to make or break the students' chances. So I hope students will approach it with a sense of wonder and discovery, and hopefully even like open to the idea of inspiration, maybe just open to that idea, um, and open to the idea that they might find meaning or mojo in writing the essay. And if that's what they find, then that's exactly what. So please do not take 4 months editing your essay like the student that Jonathan talked to. Um, please do not miss application deadlines because you need more time to edit. Please take it for as it is, and and eventually just know that it's time to let go.
Well, thank you so much. I was going to ask you, I'm glad you offered that up because I was going to ask you if you remembered what you wrote your college essay on
Oh,
because I haven't the foggiest idea what I wrote about.
yeah, I had to write a bunch because there was no common applications, but I do remember there was one, gosh, needle I tried to thread with Garfield and Gorbachev and Bill Cosby, and maybe that definitely ages me, and places me in time. And I will say, like, I remember, it's a good question to make it. Let me, if I can spin it. Do I remember students' essays? And I actually spoke on a panel the other day where the school counselor asked the lot of us, the college admissions folks, to talk about like the our favorite essay we've ever read. Okay, I hate that question, mostly because I think it tends to be the thing that families walk away with, that one topic that they remember an admissions rep saying that they love that essay. I will say I do tend to keep a list every year of my favorite essays. There's probably 10 or 12 on that list, and I've got that list for each of the 21 years that I've worked in college admissions. Keep the students' names so that I could look up the application if I wanted to. I keep the students' high school because sometimes that helps me remember, and then I keep what the essay was about. The truth is, about 90-ish% of the best essays I read over 21 plus years are about nothing. They're about small topics that no one would ever think is going to be like an amazing essay. It's about um, why I mow my family's lawn. It's about what it felt like to swim in the ocean that one day. Why my dad is sometimes kind of embarrassing. These are like small moments. And there's, 5 or 10% that are about like really massive, life changing, momentous events in a student's life. But the overwhelming majority were forgetful topics. But what was memorable about them was that it was a topic that the student really wanted to write about, and the experience that they got when writing about was certainly the experience that me and the other folks at Holy Cross in the admissions office, it's the experience that we got when we say so. The topic won't make or break your essay. It's how you feel about the topic. That's what's really going to make or break your essay.
Well, at the risk of being redundant, I have one question here from
Sure.
an attendee, and we spent a lot of time talking about it, but I want to read it because I think it is really illustrative of both positive and sort of negative things here, and that is if you don't mind. I've heard that
Yep.
having and overcoming adversity makes for good reading in a college essay. I don't have much in my life, however. What kind of accident do you recommend I get myself in between now and when I write my essay that will be compelling to read about, assuming I can recover in time? So
That I mean,
that
I
person's a
remember
good writer, right?
right. Yeah, I remember hearing that urban legend when I was applying to college. Um, uh, a very, very, very long time ago, that you really had to write about something awful that had happened to you. Um, you know, and the truth is, like, I read some bad essays that are about real adversity because the student, you could tell they didn't really want to write about it. I think what matters most is the topic that you want to write about. It does not have to be about adversity. I think that gets shared a lot because um, I think that's an essay prompt that teachers sometimes give to students about to reflect on something they've overcome, um, and and so I think it's often used. But the truth is, it is not necessary. It does not make a great essay. It really doesn't. Um, and it can make just as bad of an essay as every other topic can. Um, yeah. And I think for students who have had something traumatic happen in their life, I think they should be feel free to write about it or not write about it.
Hmm.
Sometimes students, that's not how they want to exercise their voice. And there's a part on the common application called additional information, where students have the opportunity to share something additional that they want the admissions world to know to understand their file. And sometimes that's an opportunity there for a small moment to share something like that. And sometimes the school counselor will can share something, if appropriate, about the student's background that's important for the admissions world to know. But adversity is fine to write about, but it is absolutely not necessary. We read some good essays there, but we read some bad ones as well.
I've noticed lately, maybe it's just the time of year, but and this is always sort of a tricky thing and kind of a pernicious thing when it happens. But someone on social media will screenshot a portion of a student's essay and say, "Look at this," and they let this person in, and they didn't let this person in, and what have you. Um, I don't know if you've seen an impact in terms of social media boosting things that students might see that and say, "Oh, they want me to write about this."
I think there were we've gone through waves of trends of topics that are very popular for a period of time. Um, I think they come and go every couple years. Um, Trauma and the students' need to write about trauma will always exist, um, and something they've overcome. And I'm not saying that those are bad topics. Um, I don't think there are good topics and bad topics. I think there are topics you want to write about and topics you think you're supposed to write about.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and I also think sometimes we could say like, well, I don't want to write another community service essay because you read too many of those,
Mm.
or I don't want to write about my sports injury because you read too many of those. And I say, like, forget it, forget everybody else's essay. Don't worry about what they're writing about. Write what you want to write about, and remember, we don't read these as a stack of essays. Each essay is a part of a package of all of your application materials. And if we did sit down and just read the essay straight through, devoid of all the other application materials, yeah, you would kind of like feel a little bit redundant sometimes, but that's not what we do. We're reading it as a piece of your puzzle. We spend 15 minutes reading about you, and then all of a sudden at the end we get to hear from you for the very first time. And we don't at that moment we don't remember what the person in the application before you wrote about or the one before that, or the one before that, or the one before that. So each one exists in its own place and time. So don't worry what everybody else is writing about. That doesn't affect you, and it certainly doesn't affect us. Um, just write on the topic that you want to write about. And trust me, if you find yourself feeling bored when writing a draft of that essay, um, that might be a sign that you don't have the right topic.
Well, I think that is good for me. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Drew? I mean, I think you've kind of hit a few key points again and again, but if there's anything that I haven't asked that you think is important for folks to know.
I mean, the last thing I'll say again, I will reiterate that my one hopeful takeaway and most important one is that students will feel just a little less stress, a little less anxious about this, and in moments where you may be feeling that, connect with college admissions officers, or connect with school counselors, or connect with English teachers. Those are really good sources for information. And we in the admissions world love talking about essays, so don't be afraid to to ask us after a campus tour, or ask us when we visit your high school, because it's one of the best parts of the job is talking and helping students feel a little less stressed about their essay.
Well, all right. Well, unless anyone has any questions, I think that about does it for tonight. Thanks everybody for being with us. I know we had a lot of folks here, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. So if you have any further questions, please reach out to us. As I said, everybody who has registered will get a recording of this webinar. And Drew, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks all the attendees. And have a great summer, and be open to the possibility of finding your topics.
Thanks. Thanks, Jen. Night, everybody.